Week 2 has arrived, and while there may be no Hollywood Brown, there may be no T. Higgins, you know for certain you can tune in and watch the Kansas City Chiefs face off with the Cincinnati Bengals in a matchup of the, quote, team to beat in the AFC against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's sort of confusing. I'll make Jamar Chase explain for himself. Welcome to Only Weird Games.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
You know, compared to some of the other shows on this network that may or may not feature Kent Swanson, I don't feel like I'm any sort of real Cincinnati Bengals hater. But I will say that when Jamar Chase said, quote, we're the team to beat in the AFC, we need to act like it and we need to play like it. I believe it was also a bird law expert on Twitter who noted that as the Bengals are doing this watch party for the game in Cincinnati, it's like ticketed and all of that. I believe the detail was that the website described it as a 2021 AFC Championship game rematch. Did I hit my head? Do I have false memories, or am I missing some?
I'm just really glad that the Chiefs and Bengals will now play for the first time since the 2021 AFC Championship. Finally give the Chiefs a chance to get some revenge on that loss. You know, you hate to see it.
You can't get revenge in the regular season, though, Seth. I mean, I know that. Or they're going to have to wait until they face off with the Bengals in the playoffs for the first time following the 2021 AFC Championship game.
So, do they know Samaje Perine plays for the other team?
I mean, 2021, I don't know. Yeah, it's a great question, Nate. His entire Broncos tenure never happened.
No, never happened. I mean, I just want to know, do they know Tyler Boyd's no longer there? Joe Mixon?
Joe Burrow's right wrist, maybe?
Jesse Bates?
DJ Reader ain't walking through that door.
On top of watching the 2021 AFC Championship rematch, fans will also... That was, in fact, from a bird law expert on Twitter. An excellent poll and an excellent eye for detail, as ever. This week has already been a little bit weird, guys. I know that we picked a name for this show that borders on a self-fulfilling prophecy or just things that have already been set in stone. The other thing that was bizarre for me to realize today, looking at some of the recent matchups, do you know how many times the Chiefs and Bengals played each other in 2022 and 2023?
4 times.
5 times.
Oh, wow.
It's almost impossible, and it's the calendar year.
Yes,
so
okay.
This is absolutely some funny math, but if it feels like they've played a lot, it's because they have. 5 times from January 2022 through New Year's Eve last year when they played the Bengals. So
it was a
first thing at the turn, yes, and it was Jake Browning or whatever. I'm only 95. I'm not even 95. I'm like 50-50. That was the name of the quarterback.
Yep.
But they have been a high-level, high-frequency rivalry. Yep. The thing that's kind of bizarre now is that I thought most of this mythos that the Bengals got to hold as the Chief stoppers, I kind of figured some of that would have faded by now, and it seems like it hasn't.
Not only is this show called Only Weird Games, ladies and gentlemen, it's also the show where, again, the team that you root for has Patrick Mahomes, who catches his own deflected pass in a very pivotal moment to ensure 25 seconds goes off the clock, to ensure that you're 1-0, to ensure that you have a chance to bury the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2. I'm sure they'll do it in a weird fashion because they always do. But this is still a rivalry, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last. But they could win. The Bengals can still win, I think. I mean, that's what it takes to have a rivalry, right?
Seth, your mic came unplugged when you sat it down there. We were getting some weird sounds, and now I've realized what happened there. So you may need to check your ports accordingly. That's just not giving us anything. That's all right. We'll get there.
It's a weird show, kids.
Yeah, sometimes by design and sometimes by happenstance. We usually get there one way or the other. But I want to have the Nick Bolton discourse early on here, and then we can trickle into the rest of these Bengals things. I'll wait until Seth is properly mic'd to handle that.
Am I properly mic'd?
You're back.
Yes,
you sound great. You sound better than Cam Taylor-Britt, who doesn't seem to have learned the lesson on this. This is me saying I want to talk about Nick Bolton and not yet giving us the opportunity. Speed, he said when asked what Xavier Worthy brings to the table. That's about it. He can run straight, run jet sweeps, and just run straight. He can't do too much else. So that's about it. I feel like if you put your hands on him, he's only 100-something pounds. So if you put your hands on him, you'll stop the speed. So basically, get hands on him. I mean, if it's that easy, guys, we talked about this on Tuesday that Zack Taylor is 1-10 through his first 2 weeks of his tenure as the Bengals head coach. Ooh. I don't think most pre-game, pre-week chatter really moves the needle by and large. Maybe individual things can, but whatever. I'd rather players be honest than say nonsense.
Right.
The problem is the Bengals keep saying nonsense that's just like hater nonsense. It's still not true. Like, if he was like, Xavier Worthy was able to go say some nice things about Jamar Chase and to say that he didn't really have any experience in Chiefs-Bengals as a rivalry. And then like 3 hours later, Cam Taylor-Britt was like, he's a bum. He's fast in a straight line. He's basically an Olympic sprinter. I hate him, and I'm going to touch him, and he's going to fall apart. And that's not how that's going to go. The Bengals have the weirdest vibes in football, and they feel like a team that should be desperate at this point.
Can I tell you one of the more interesting things Perine, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals, said in the locker room today with a straight face?
Yeah.
To me, Blair Kirkhoff, Aaron Ladd, and Harold Kuntz. We're just doing a nice little chit chat. Hey, man, facing your former team, what's it like? I think it was Blair who asked, Blair from the Kansas City Star, hey, when you were on the other side, what was it like Chiefs week heading into the game? With a straight face, this man told us, again, having already heard what Cam Britt said, they don't have a lot of guys that really speak, before the game. They don't have a lot of talkers. They just go about their business. Real professional, real quiet. They got rid of a lot of the guys who talk. And I know, I think he said they got rid of most of the guys who talk.
Just code for Eli Apple.
Yay!
So, they're a great team. I expect them to play much better. Zack Taylor's a really good coach. And I just, what other thing could I say right now? I mean, they're just smart. It's going to be tough. They're going to bring their best, and they're just really respectful. The next game's always the most important game. And so we didn't get up for the Chiefs. No, not at all. Ever.
I mean, clearly, yeah.
And
not enough.
You know what I really love, and I have some Cincinnati takes that I'll save for when we're
just kind of here now. We are going to make some Nick Bolton time at some point, but I brought us to Cincy Needs This, and Nate brought us to Samaje Perine, and most people don't care about the rundown. It's okay. We can do whatever order.
That sounds good. So there's a bunch of things at work here. For one, Samaje Perine, good for him on just being like immediately indoctrinated into the Andy Reid school of we barely ever talk. Occasionally, like I think last few years, like Justin Reed might say a thing or two, but that's not quick.
And then what happens?
Yeah. And Seth, guess where Samaje Perine's locker is in proximity to Justin Reed's locker?
Ooh, I don't know.
It's right across from one another. It's real close, kids. It's real close. So I'm sure really between meetings, just casually in the locker room, I'm sure Justin Reed said, "Hey, man, I know you're new here. I know you used to play there. Take it from me, young man. You don't want to go up to the coach's office. You don't want to do that. before game day, after game day. You don't want that life, because that's literally what happened in, what was it, December of 2022. Justin Reed said he was going to lock up Hayden Hurst. I don't know if Hayden Hurst was the guy on the roster, but or was it Higbee?
He said
Tyler
Higbee, I think.
Yes,
too,
it was Tyler Higbee. I'm gonna lock Tyler Higbee up, even though Tyler Higbee was no longer a part of the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah. He was just a white tight end, not named Travis Kelce.
That's right.
And the next day, he got that tap on the shoulder and said, "Hey, coach needs you upstairs." Yeah. But for what? Godspeed.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the most interesting things about Andy Reid, and there's a lot of things that are interesting about Andy Reid, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. One of the things that he's managed to do as a player's coach, and I've only really realized this about Reid listening to Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce, as well as Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones, talk about him on various outlets, especially, why can't I remember the name of like the most famous podcast on earth right now?
New Heights.
Others. There it is. Yeah. Wow. Rough, tough scene from me.
That's all right.
But hearing them, it's so interesting hearing Travis and Jason Kelce talk about asking Andy Reid to come on the podcast and how both of them were afraid to do it is really interesting to me. Like in the way Travis described it, he was like, yeah, I just was finally like, hey, coach, you want to maybe come on my podcast? I know you really don't like stuff like this. It's okay if you don't. And it's like this college coach dynamic that he manages to pull off with guys that are richer. And I mean, just most pro coaches have to do it one way or the other, right? They're kind of one of the dudes, even though they're the head coach, or they are Bill Belichick and they're this all-powerful tyrant. Andy Reid manages, when you hear Travis and Jason and Patrick Mahomes, all of them talk about like the mustache. The mustache is going. You're like, oh no. How he manages that while still being a player's coach, because he lets them do stuff. I mean, they do their stuff on the field usually. He lets them get away with stuff during games, but he still manages to instill a culture of some fear. Yeah. And that's incredible, because these are adults. These are grown men who are very rich, very successful, and are also men. Most 30-year-old men don't really live in this culture of fear. They don't do well with that, because they're just well, no, that's not how this is going to go. But he manages that, and it's so funny to see that. It's that thing where you can see guys in the interviews, and they're like, yeah, great team. We're excited to play them. And you can see them. You can just see them see Andy Reid's mustache in their head. Just hey, we don't do that here. And he just it's the funniest thing. I'm excited for Perine, seeing the indoctrination has already occurred.
Yep.
Because and with Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, yeah, we just kind of let our play do the talking. We'll kind of see how it goes. They're a great team, and it's
a great team. They're great. Even though they lost last week, they're going to play a lot better. That was a consistent message today in the locker room. Yeah, we know they lost to the Patriots, and we know that was a surprise. Nah, man, I ain't falling for it. Nope. Yep. Nope.
So with Perine, I don't know whether it'd be a revenge game. He's kind of more bounced around the league a little bit. I don't know if he's got any hard feelings. I think he played pretty well for the Bengals, and the Broncos gave him a decent sized contract. Not a huge one, but a decent one. That's why they cut him, because he played fine for the Broncos last year. Actually, pretty well, really well, but not elite, but really well. And so I don't know if it's a revenge game, but it is kind of interesting to see him on the other side of the dynamic. And for me, what I'm excited about is, you only saw him on the field for a handful of snaps. You could see the timing was just a skosh off. He's a pro. He's been doing this a long time. Him and Mahomes, just because we know the way Mahomes works. They've both been thinking about that failed connection. That I don't know if it would have gone for 6, because there were a couple guys with angles, but that's at least a 20-yard gain. And that's if he doesn't break a tackle, which, if you read my film review on him, he's quite good at, especially with guys that weigh 30 pounds less than him, which low-key is one of the most impressive things in football, is when 195, 200-pound corners tackle these mammoth dudes in space. How they do that is beyond me. I think it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Pacheco get a lighter load than what he saw in week 1, and see Perine take more snaps than he took in week 1. I don't think I think week 1 calmed people's expectations a little bit on Carson Steele, who I'm glad made the roster. He earned it. But I also think this would be the game where you might see that ratchet up with Perine to more of, you've had the longer prep period. I think now you might see him take, 15 snaps, give or take, something like that. And I'm excited to see what he does in the offense. I think you can see the pieces there.
So he had 8 snaps against the Baltimore Ravens, 1 touch for 10 yards on a screen. You could probably put this in the category of a revenge game, just because we asked him today, "Hey man, how many tips you giving? How many signals? Scheme recognition. Things they like to do on a certain down and distance." We asked him, "Hey, how many guys have reached out to you?" This was his quote, ladies and gentlemen. Quote: "The entire defense."
Excellent.
He's giving it, guys. He's giving it up. He's given up the playbook. He's been interrogated and he folded immediately. Okay, so he's given everything he can give to the defense, and we got to talk to Leo Chenal, and Leo said he was very helpful in that regard. But another quote that is going to be in a story in The Athletic is, quote, this is again from Samaje Perine playing the Cincinnati Bengals. "It's going to be weird. The whole week has been very unusual. Even watching them last Sunday against the Patriots, and last year when I watched a couple of their games as a member of the Denver Broncos, to where it's extra film work this week, it is very weird because I pick up on certain things that I've seen before that I remember during practice about the Cincinnati Bengals defense and offense."
That is not something you really want to hear as a Bengals fan. Although, look, it's the same coaches, and there's always going to be staples. But 2 years later,
basically a year in one game. Seth.
I suppose that's fair. A year
in training camp. I'll go ahead and meet you guys halfway.
Yeah. How about this? 2 full off seasons.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I've often thought about what it is that Zack Taylor actually does.
Do you want another quote?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, more than anything.
Like the air I breathe.
Yeah.
So Seth asks, Seth, before I give you this quote, again, from Samaje Perine today, what are your thoughts on Zack Taylor before I give you Samaje Perine's thoughts on Zack Taylor?
He is the office space guy that brings the specs from the engineers to the customers, except she doesn't actually do that. But he has excellent people skills, but his secretary does it for him. How hard is it to design an offense around these guys?
I have a crazy follow up to that, but I want to hear what Samaje Perine said first. We're not done cooking Zack Taylor.
So one of our favorite things about football, ladies and gentlemen, is the "I know that you know that I know that you know." And Samaje literally said that today. He's like, "I know that Zack knows that I know about the offense." So here's his quote. Quote, "They definitely changed some stuff. With them, it's not as much about scheming the defense. They run what they run until you stop it. They're not going to change the entire offense just because I know a little bit about it." So kids, you might want to open up your notebook and write down what I tell you, because he ain't scheming the defense. Samaje Perine is saying they got staples and they do what they do.
Can you say the specific scheme the defense part again verbatim?
Yeah. This is a direct quote, again, from Samaje Perine, who played 4 seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals. Here we go. Quote, "With them, it's not as much a scheming the defense. They run what they run until you stop it. They're not going to change the entire offense just because I know a little bit about it."
The last part makes sense. Seth, what do you think about everything before that?
Every
Would you scheme for the defense if you were an offensive coordinator?
I would consider it. I mean, here's the deal. The best defensive coordinators alter their approaches game to game. So it might make sense to not necessarily scheme for Spags. But let me tell you, if you look at the worst game from last year for the Chiefs defense was the Packers game, right? And you could see LaFleur taking advantage of some of the things that Spags does, because there are things Spags does. Like if someone were to get me in a room with Kyle Shanahan, I would say, Kyle, for the love of God, stop running so many condensed formations against Spags, because he loves it.
Right.
It's like, oh, cool, I can blitz McDuffie and Justin Reed now because everyone's just packed in. Great. I would say, hey. I don't know. They tend to keep certain people on the field in dime formation, and if you run a drag across his face, he's going to follow that guy, and your running back's going to have all the room in the world. I mean, those are things that these are incredibly teeny, tiny tendency type things.
Right.
Even someone as gifted as Spags, he does have some tendencies, and you don't just run what you run. Like, Andy Reid has not been successful. If you go turn on Andy Reid's games that he was calling in the early 2000s, the offense looks very different. So that's less than ideal, I would say, and would explain maybe why it's been so hard for them to win on offense outside of Joe Burrow makes a great read and throw, or Jamar Chase makes a great, and they've got great personnel, and that's covered him by and large.
Well, in terms of this Sunday's game, we can already remove Joe Mixon from the equation. He plays for the Houston Texans. We can already remove Tyler Boyd, who I think was a better receiver than people gave credit to. Mm-hmm. He is now a member of the Tennessee Titans. And T. Higgins, who's dealing with a hamstring injury, has not practiced this week. Yep. So Jamar Chase is in a contract dispute?
And Joe Burrow, for what Spags said today, like, he's not buying that Joe Burrow just can't throw the football right now. I don't know what else he would say publicly. I don't think he should say, his arm, his wrist a little limp out there. I don't know. Yeah, we're just gonna make him hand it off 45 times. But he didn't look right for whatever was going on. If he's trying to protect the truth about his health, or if something in the offense just wasn't working, either way, it was not a useful unit against the Patriots.
Right, and you can't, when you have elite talent, you can spread the defense and run staple offenses. You can run what's the concept? 9-8-9. You can run it, because it's good.
Over and over.
But their talent is not what it used to be. And if you would like for me to tell you the depth chart, as of right now, it's Joe Burrow, Zach Moss, Jamar Chase, Trenton Irwin. I ain't never heard this dude's name, and Mike Gesicki. So there's a difference.
Earlier today, this same topic came up organically as Jordan Foote and I were chatting. And I was trying to think, who's the Zach Taylor comp? Because he got to a Super Bowl, and he's had a top 3 wide receiver his entire time as a head coach, or I think that's been his entire time, maybe not quite 1 or 2 years short. But in this era, he's had one of the 3 best receivers in the league, and then another top 30 receiver probably, and a top 5-ish quarterback, depending on his health and how he's playing or whatever. And they got to a Super Bowl, but it's been a pretty consistent series of varying types of disappointments about that. So I was like, well, is it Mike McCarthy without actually, if he would have won that Super Bowl, is he Mike McCarthy? Is he just AFC Nick Sirianni? Because beat for beat, that's kind of there. Offensive talent, uninteresting scheme choices, got to a Super Bowl and lost it, but has a bit of cachet in terms of regular season success and some postseason success. And also, the vibes with both of those teams are always weird. Both of those coaches have weird demeanor, Sirianni more so than Zack Taylor, but the Bengals always have kind of a weird energy about them. And I don't even know that that's necessarily an insult, because other than the Rams and Tom Brady's Bucks, in the last 5 years, the best you can do is lose in the Super Bowl. That is literally the high water mark outside of those two NFC teams in the Chiefs era, best you can hope for is lose to the Chiefs. But it does put them in such a weird spot, especially while Higgins is in a literal franchise or literal, contract year, and Chase is trying to get contract stuff done. Burrow's making a whole bunch of money. I don't know when that cap hit kicks in. It kind of feels like we're about to be 1 year away from being a year away from like an aggressive rebuild around Burrow and Chase and some new head coach.
I thought the Sirianni comparison was a good one. Because you do end up asking yourself, what is it that you're bringing to the table? And we're spoiled as Chiefs fans and analysts and whatever else you want to call us, in that we know what Andy Reid brings to the table. Although, it really is, the longer he coaches, the more people have started to, I think, realize Reid is more than he's not just a schemer. He really does manage to get players to buy in.
Yes.
And follow. And not everyone can do that. Like, from everything we know, Josh McDaniels is perfectly good at scheming plays. Well, part of that's when you're coaching Tom Brady, but still. Yeah. But like, there's lots of guys.
But he was helpful. He was helpful to Tom Brady to a certain extent.
They adapted their offense multiple times.
Correct.
But getting buy-in, and then there's guys who are good at getting buy-in, getting guys to run through a wall for you. But there's only certain, like, rah-rah type stuff is only good for so long. Like,
it's why I love Mike Vrabel. Somebody hired us, man. He's one of the best rah-rah coaches we got, who's also old school.
I have actually thoughts on that, but that's down the road.
He's got too much girth for people in the analytics department. That's what's wrong with him.
Yeah, he's too scary. I forgot about that. But like with Taylor, and this kind of goes into does Cincy have to win? It's week 2. And I understand if we got to go to break before we get.
Let's unwrap this and then we'll circle back around. Let's because I just suggested that Zack Taylor. No, I mean it, Seth. I see your eyebrow. I suggested that Zack Taylor might get fired after maybe not if this year goes poorly, but if this year goes poorly and the next year goes poorly, that might be time for the reset. So I think having a must-win conversation now is reasonable.
Here's the thing: 0-2 is tough. Now the Bengals have climbed out of holes before in terms of start off the season 0-2 or even 0-3. They've done that before. However, it's interesting, talking to Bengals fans, it was kind of presented like this year might be a year that they have as much talent as they have in previous years. I personally don't buy that. I think Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon were important contributors to their offense.
Right.
And not just in terms of production, but in terms of scheme. And then I also think, and I'm a little biased here because he always played so well against the Chiefs, but DJ Reader, I swear, every time the Chiefs tried to run the ball, it didn't matter. I mean, even once the interior of the offensive line got remade, DJ Reader was like, nope. And that was part of why they would struggle. They could be more multiple against other teams. And against the Bengals, they just had to shotgun and throw because DJ Reader would not let them run the ball. And I mean, he wasn't a great pass rusher, but he was at least adequate at times. He'd get some push up the middle. I just don't see that same talent. Now, Trey Hendrickson is a monster, and I'm really worried about Suamataia. We talked about that on Tuesday. Like, hey, maybe a little more sliding and a little more chips. And
come on, Samaje. You know where Trey Henderson doesn't like to be chips blocked.
You see those there ribs, Samaje? You know what he needs? He needs a shoulder right into those there ribs because he was causing some problems for the Pats. Their interior just wasn't helping them much. But I mean, like Lou Anarumo, I think coaches them up really well, especially in individualized game plans. I think at times he's almost a better playoff defensive coordinator, it seems like, than he is throughout the course of the entire season because he's so good at changing things up. Anyway, be all that as it may, the Bengals' best shot to me seemed like the last couple of years. And then the talent bleeding starts. And then it's, okay, well, what top talent can you keep and all that sort of stuff. And I just, 0-2, with the vibes they currently have, with T. Higgins hurt, with Jamar Chase, he held out until the absolute last second. And then the whole, why did you only get 6 targets, ask coaches is...
Not great.
Not great.
Not great.
That's not a great vibe. And I know talking to former players and then hearing other players, talk again on podcast stuff about how tough it is in the NFL when you're losing because you got a week between games. And if you lose a couple games in a row or 3 games in a row, then it becomes like close to a month.
It's a month of losing.
Yeah. Whereas again, in baseball or basketball or hockey, like the season's longer, or it's longer, more games to where we got a game in 2 days. Let's whatever. In football, you gotta just sit there. You sit in it for for a week.
It also we never talk about this. I'm sorry to hop in. It's just a fascinating little tangent. You're sitting in a classroom too. Do you remember what it felt like to lose a high school football game and then have to spend the rest of your week in a classroom? Or to watch your team? It's watching your team lose and then going to work all week, but your entire work week is about why your team lost and how you need to be better next Sunday. I mean, I understand why teams just, I'm actually surprised more teams don't ultimately just kind of spiral at that point. Because that's a bleak picture you're painting, Seth.
Remember when Brendan Bean, after losing to the Bengals in the divisional round, said, "Look, man, it'd be nice if I had top 5 picks every year consecutively." Bengals didn't have a top 5 pick this year. Didn't have a top 5 pick last year. I'm just saying, I too would like to draft Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in basically the first pick of the second round. I would love to do that, but
I was giving Josh a chance to.
Nah, people know.
Yeah.
Nah,
okay.
It's all right.
There's just a whole lot of interesting that goes in this, and this is where we've talked about this before. The Chiefs, and before them, the Patriots, because the people view the Patriots as one dynasty, even though it was really 2 dynasties with 10 years. But I mean, it's not. They had Super Bowl appearances during that 10-year gap, so.
And they won the division every effing year.
Those teams, doesn't matter. I think the Jets won once. Sanchez.
Yeah, the Sanchez was in 2 AFC Championship games. So
that's right, baby.
Two dynasties separated by 10 years of incredibly competent football.
Yep, really high level play. And then now the Chiefs doing what they've done has kind of broken people's brains on what success is in the NFL.
Yep.
Because really the Chiefs last year, or really the year before, should have really started to fall off because you had those incredible drafts kind of come through, and you got to pay, and you can't pay everyone. But instead, and this is where, with the whole Tyreek Hill trade, in terms of the money stuff not working and all that, they just reloaded. They just crushed. That's what one great draft class can set you up for a few years.
Yes.
But if you get a great draft class every few years, it just changes everything. And if you're smart about certain free agency signings and you've got the right guys in the right places, it's kind of broken people's brains what to expect. What the Bengals are experiencing right now is the last few years they experienced what happens when you crush a couple of drafts in a row. I mean, crush them. And you've got a good defensive coordinator. And now you start to see some of the talent bleeding out. Here's a thought I have, though, on Cincy needing to win. They have largely, in my opinion, over the last few years, built their reputation on the back of what they've done against the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. That is where you get Joey Burr, He beat Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead in the AFC Championship and then couldn't even put up 13 points in the Super Bowl.
Your mic cut out there. I didn't hear you say Burrowhead, but I know you did.
Yeah. and people, if everyone wants to talk about, really the Chiefs kind of handed them that AFC Championship game. The Chiefs know it. When they talk about it, they're careful to give the Bengals credit, but they're like, yeah, there's some plays there we'd like back. And Mahomes, one of the worst halves he's played ever.
Hey, maybe they just tackle Samaje Perine. Game might be different.
I know. Maybe they tackle Samaje Perine. Maybe there's a whole bunch of ifs there, but they have built this reputation largely on the back of we are not afraid of the NFL's boogeyman. We're not afraid. We'll talk trash and then we'll go and beat them. And you know what? They did a couple times in a row. When it really was at its height, in 2021, they win in the regular season And then they beat them in the playoffs. And this was when no one was beating Patrick Mahomes outside the Super Bowl. It was a foregone conclusion. This was after 13 seconds. Part of their reputation is built on the back of one of the greatest games anyone's ever played, but it wasn't even played by them. It's because Mahomes looked so inevitable the week before. So unstoppable. Had you told me the Chiefs, like when they went to overtime, when the Chiefs lost that game, I was shocked.
Yeah.
And so then they go into 2022, they beat them in the regular season again, and they did it going into that whole week, talking trash, with swagger, with confidence. They built their entire reputation on being better than the Chiefs. Now, if they don't win this game, now they'll have lost to the Chiefs 3 times in a row. Because the one, it was in the AFC Championship, and that was a bummer, but that's just one game. Okay, pretty important, but whatever. Well, Burrow was hurt. Okay, fair enough. Well, here we are, 3 in a row. A lot of the mystique is built on the back of beating the Chiefs and not being afraid of the Chiefs. That's why they're not afraid to talk. And you know what? Good on them. Rivalries are good for the league. I do think, especially if you're one of the guys that got torched in the AFC Championship last year, I don't know why you'd open your mouth when it's like, well, he's just fast. Yeah, he's a lot faster than Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
And you couldn't keep up with him down the sideline, but you're going to, like, if that had been Xavier Worthy instead of Rashee Rice on that play, because that was a blown coverage, these things happen, that would have been 6, because Rice is a lot of things, but breakaway speed isn't necessarily one of them. That top gear just is not there.
On the field.
Yeah.
I knew as soon as he leaned over, I was like, I know where this is going.
I let it go. I think I took strike 1 and strike 2, and then there's a third meatball. I was like, fine, we'll do it.
So that's, to me, in as much as I think that's part of their belief in themselves too. I think it's part of why they've believed so firmly in themselves, because they were able to, for a couple years, look the NFL's Debo in the eyes, and I mean Debo from Friday now, not Debo from San Francisco, and say, we knocked that guy the bleep out 3 times. And so why would we be scared of you? That's at stake for them.
It also gives Burrow that, I am not a Joe Burrow hater, but it is still a false equivalence. It gives Joe Burrow the false equivalence to Tom Brady as the quarterbacks, end of list, who have done that, who have beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. And still, like, an outrageous thing to think about the context of that, what that actually means about how good Patrick Mahomes has been. Like, oh yeah, it's Brady and Burrow. They're the only ones to really get Mahomes, despite the fact that neither of them actually play defense. And also, just something to plant in your head for the rest of the season. Everything we've said here in this conversation, the Houston Texans, they're doing the right thing. Their window is more narrow than they think it is. And so, in retrospect, even though the whole, like, double barrel first and second and fourth overall picks or whatever they ended up with.
Yeah. First and fourth.
And what was it?
It was so many picks.
Was it 3rd and 4th? Is that what you said, Nate?
No, it's 1st and 4th, I believe. I can
second. Well, it was second because Stroud went after Bryce, which
That's
I'm
right, second
guessing
and
no one
fourth,
regrets. So I was trying to do the math there. So 2nd and 4th. So, like, that at the time kind of freaked me out because I was like, I don't know if you want to be able to mortgage the future that much to get yourself a
Oh my
defensive
God,
playmaker.
it was 2nd and 3rd. Ah!
Okay, it was 2-3. Okay. So
that's right, because they traded with Arizona, which, by the way,
Arizona should be happy too. It worked out fine for them in the grand scheme of things, and where they were at situationally. Bringing in Stephon Diggs has, like, huge blow up potential, obviously, but they're doing the right thing by not just saying, "Oh yeah, our window is as wide as CJ Stroud is good." That's not really how it works, because eventually you do have to start selling those pieces off. We are way overdue for a break, so no one gets tricked today, and we'll talk about our boogeyman, Nick Bolton, on the other side of the break.
Come on.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
I mean, that was Seth's word, wasn't it? From the Chief of the North newsletter, mnchiefsfan.substack.com. You can read the work, you can follow along, you can watch the clips. It has more likes than comments by almost a 2-to-1 ratio, Seth, so I think you gotta assume you're doing okay here in the discourse. We talked about Nick Bolton on Tuesday. We've talked about Nick Bolton a lot. You can take it from here.
All right.
I don't.
Clear out.
Sometimes I think Seth is as much as Seth loves his wife, sometimes Seth is married to the middle. Sometimes Seth is married to the truth is somewhere here in between, as you said at least twice in this specific story, and both sides will be represented. You're a lawyer making cases, and I respect all of that.
Yeah.
So, and also your work is here to be shown. People can see this, read this, and follow along. I don't want you to overly couch what you found, because it's not completely binary. It's not completely black and white. But as you said, Nick Bolton had a bad game in week 1. Some of it has explanations that may not continue. Some of them are things we've seen before. There's my generous setup for you, a reasonable man doing his best to analyze fairly. What did you see from Nick Bolton?
A really tough game. Some of it looks like he was just gassed. Nate's cleared out.
I can also clear.
You could see on film, Nick Bolton doesn't typically jog. That's just not necessarily who he is. Sometimes he will, on a play where he knows he's not going to get there, and that's smart. Conserve your energy. But he was clearly gassed midway through the third quarter. You could see it. That has an effect on guys physically and mentally. If I were to sum up why I'm a little more long-term concerned about Bolton, I think, and we've talked about him enough here that I don't feel the need to couch it as much as I would in other venues. Go read the piece, check it out. Here's what I will say. The reason I'm concerned. There were multiple snaps where you would see Nick Bolton jump on a route coming across his zone harder than I think he needed to. And I think at times a little bit against the play call. When you've got Trent McDuffie, from what it looks like, assigned to close out on Zay Flowers running a drag, that's very likely called. You don't need to do that. Do your job, stay in the middle of the field, and help prevent the scramble. Now, Chris Jones got knocked over on that play. A whole lot happens. Defense is complicated. If I were to say the thing that has me the most concerned, it's him being out of position. He's a smart player, but his window for being out of position is smaller than a guy like, and this isn't a fair comparison because he's the best in the league, but like Fred Warner. Or even Willie Gay Jr., who I'm not saying Willie's a better linebacker than Nick Bolton. I don't think he necessarily is. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. But Willie Gay Jr. could be out of position in coverage and still win because he runs like a safety or a deer. Like he's just...
Or a gazelle.
It's freakish. Yeah, or gazelle. Bolton doesn't have that. He has to be perfect in his reads because he does not move well in space. And if you think he does, watch that touchdown given up to Isaiah Likely, okay? Yeah. Giving up the touchdown, it happens. Your back is turned.
Giving up the completion. Giving up the completion
Giving up the completion, it happens. Part of the reason, though, his helmet has to be turned because he has to sprint full out to keep up down the field, and he can't turn and check because he's not that kind of athlete. But then when the ball arrives and you let that turn into a touchdown, that's a fiasco. That's and it's just demonstrative of his inability to change direction well in space. And that's consistent. And the problem when you're a guy who's playing every single snap, including dime snaps, when you are breaking on routes that come through your zone, you by definition, the route's over here. I'm going to break on that route a little bit to close it off to make sure no throw there. But now my momentum's taking me this way. And what if they, for example, have a running back leaking out of the backfield? I'm not fast enough to get there. And the Ravens, on a crucial 3rd and 12, called up a play explicitly designed to take advantage of that. Now, it was made harder by the fact that Josh Williams got too deep in his zone too, and that's part of why Jalen Watson, I think, is starting over Josh Williams. And we talked about that Tuesday.
Yep.
But the reality is, and I wrote about this here, and you can look at these plays back to back because what I'm saying is they run a drag right in front of Bolton to get him to bite on it, and then they leak the running back out of the backfield, and they know Bolton can't get there. Why would they do that? Because they did it to him 2 or 3 times in the AFC Championship game. So you can't tell me that it's just a one-off thing or it's a one-time thing. There's a nearly identical looking play, and I posted it in the article.
Yes.
It's almost an identical look, having now it was a different route combination, but it was the same design. Get Bolton to bite a little bit inside, and he's not fast enough to close. And that's problematic. And now, does any of that, and this is my 20-second caveat, does any of that mean he's a terrible player? No, of course not. Don't have all your arguments about someone, or something for that matter, Don't have all your arguments at once. Talk about the one thing at a time, because more than one thing can be true. And he can be a perfectly fine linebacker, but have some real problems in space that Baltimore specifically took advantage of a few times. And that's something when I look at...
You know who else took advantage of Nick Bolton? Can I tell you a stat that is almost entirely Nick Bolton related?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Do you know where I'm going, Josh?
I don't think so.
Ladies and gentlemen, at a certain point in his career, we knew who Samaje Perine was. And that's okay.
Brother. Yeah.
But in December of 2022, in, I think, replacing a injured or at least somewhat compromised Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine had 21 carries, I should say, for 106 rushing yards. And even worse, he had 6 receptions, a season high, for 49 yards.
Yep.
Which meant it was 8-9-8 or 9-8-9, check it down to the running back.
Yep. And that's a reflective thing. And the Bengals are an interesting team because in the past, Bolton has had some tough games against the Bengals because they've isolated him in space against Mixon or Perine or other guys in the middle of the field. Burrow is very different than Lamar Jackson. He will it was the 2022 regular season game when the Bengals beat the Chiefs. Now, some of that, the Chiefs, Kelsey had a crucial fumble. Some stuff went wrong. Hendrickson had a big game. Some of it, though, was Burrow attacking the middle of the field over and over and over and over again. And that's where it becomes the long-term thing, is the Chiefs need to really ask themselves, why are they continually putting a guy out there in a position that isn't necessarily his strength? And I'm not saying Drew Tranquil is, prime Luke Kuechly. He's not. But he can do things in coverage in dime looks that Bolton can't. They have a really deep safety group that they really like. They have options to do something about this. And that's where I would say it's just worth talking about that Bolton does have some weaknesses. And I do see a good question here I want to address really quick. Greg Slayton asks, so does Bolton average 10 tackles simply because he plays 100% of the defensive snaps? That's a great question. Part of the reason he averages so many tackles is because NFL defenses are designed to funnel guys towards their inside linebacker, is the short answer. He's also partly because he's a
really
good thumping linebacker.
He's a really good tackler.
He's a really good tackler. Great tackler. Like, if someone were to ask me, is there any area where we know Bolton is top 5 at his position in the league? Some people would say intelligence. I guess I can't definitively prove that. I don't know. That might be. Tackler, I would say yes. He's a great tackler. He gets near the line of scrimmage. Guys generally don't get past him. But defenses are designed to funnel guys towards the middle of the field. And you're going to collect tackles that way. So that's where that's what I found with Bolton. Those are the things that I'm a little worried will have a long-term impact, especially against teams that they're going to watch what the Ravens did on a couple of key late downs. And even that last play of the game, Bolton should have seen that likely got passed off.
Spags acknowledged that briefly today. Spags said that Nick could have been deeper there. It was, I think, the most detail we got specifically from him, Nate. And I can't even remember if you were in the room then or if you were gotten to the locker room by that point. But Spags mentioned that he could have gotten deeper. Now, Spags also said, thank God he got there when he did. As Seth has written about, Isaiah Likely went up and down, and his toe was out, and it was not due to a great play by either Nick Bolton nor Drew Tranquil there. It seemed more like Kevin Durant with his toe on the line in the playoffs than it did than it did the Brian Cook hit that I thought Isaiah Likely broke his collarbone on.
Right.
1 or 2 plays prior.
Yeah.
Weird thing we didn't talk about on Tuesday.
Yeah, 2 plays prior. Yeah, where he got up, where I thought they were gonna have to somehow cart him to the locker room with again 14, 15 seconds left on the clock, and then 2 plays later, he's apparently made the game tying touchdown at least.
Unreal.
He was like he attended a Benny Hinn conference or something and got sent flying across the room.
Yes,
you're healed.
Every NFL football player is incredible on some level, which we should probably say more often. Seth, you make a very good point to say we don't need to have every conversation, every debate all at once, right?
Right.
And there is a micro and a macro to this. and I'm going to take us to the macro because I love some of the big picture things. But the micro can be like, hey, should a safety get on the field in one of these situations? Tranquil and Jaden Hicks gets his first NFL defensive snaps to be able to solve some of these problems instead of just leaving Nick Bolton in that spot for 100% of the snaps. Here's the other thing that I think is the double-edged sword of Nick Bolton and of the discourse around him. This part has nothing to do with Nick Bolton, football player. But when he is presented as one of the stars on the defense from the Chiefs from a PR standpoint, right? You get those big graphics. Usually the defenders are Chris Jones and Nick Bolton. Trent McDuffie might be working his way in there, but those are kind of the faces of your defense. Justin Reed, I guess, also deserves to be mentioned there, but he wasn't homegrown the way that Bolton and Jones were. Draft picks who Jones hopefully will be very close to spending his whole career here, if not the whole thing. Bolton will find out. But within all of that also comes the offseason conversations around Nick Bolton that we've had a lot of fun with, of what is he going to be worth on the open market? What would he have been worth if the Chiefs offered him something before he got hurt at training camp? I assume that you would not be having long-term contract discussions while a guy's not practicing, so I'm kind of cutting it off there. But where have those conversations led? And this is some like pretty raw numbers, but Willie Gay Jr. is going to make $3 million this year, and Fred Warner is going to make 19.5. That's his cash number. His cap hit is lower than that. I don't even need to play the game of, okay, well, he's 60% Willie Gay, 40% Fred Warner. Where's that put his number? But he is under that microscope, rightfully, in the same way that Chris Jones has lived under that microscope during his time with the Chiefs. Two major contract, kind of three, 2.5 major contract discussions, debates about his value. Where is he worth this money? Where is he a liability? That kind of thing comes for elite players that want to make elite money. And so it's arrived for Nick Bolton. When in year one and year two, we weren't having these conversations about him as strongly because we didn't have the inevitable $15 million AAV contract around the corner. And that's why I think the tenor has changed with the tenor of the conversation has changed. The play, as Seth has reviewed it, that can go back to the micro. Seth's analysis in the newsletter of week one is unrelated to the money. The overall way we talk about him, I think, has to be, because that's the conversation being had in the front office.
And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I was the one who said, what, 18
We
million?
kept going up. We went up for a while there. I think we might have gotten.
I just remember telling people that, like, again, and this is, again, partly due to inflation and the cap going up and obviously the money increasing. But, like, people have to get comfortable with, like, a guard making $20 million.
Right.
And so for someone like Nick Bolton, with, again, as you're telling the audience, Josh, that Fred Warner makes 19, he's kind of a $17-18 million player at best. And so I was just trying to project people what to expect if things go a certain way. Now, unfortunately for Nick, he played a lot of last year through injuries. And he had another injury pop up yet again in training camp. He missed all the preseason, and his coach kind of left him out to dry. As I said last episode, you cannot play 80 snaps when you have not had any football conditioning whatsoever, because you hadn't played any football at any point that is seriously consequential since the Super Bowl. So what most coaches will tell you is the first month of the season is when you can really start to, like, be critical, right? To where you can really start to find tendencies and things we should change. And I know some coaches are more apt to making major changes or bigger changes that maybe we analysts, fans, reporters all recognize because after the bye week. But if you give Nick Bolton a month, it cannot look this way in week 4, right? It can't look the way it looked in week 5. I know they have the bye week a lot earlier this season, but I think that's where things might swing for Steve Spagnuolo. As much as he wants Nick Bolton to be on the field because he is such a good communicator, because he is such a good tackler, because guys on the field obviously trust his eyes. And again, he is an additional coach, on the field, but their most important game beyond Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals is week 4 on the road at the Chargers. If Nick Bolton has a similar performance against Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, then you have a reasonable issue that you need to start to solve in terms of personnel decisions, packages, and how you want to sort of try to accentuate his skills and limit his weaknesses. But for a team that I think what's so damning about what Seth has said and has written is when a team just played you in January and then they can demonstrate yet again where the weakness is. I don't know how he can play better other than getting healthier and kind of to Seth's point, being more judicious in his eyes. Here we go again, talking about eye discipline.
Right.
And also, how does he move in space to where he's not such a liability?
Seth, you can kind of put a bow on it with this, but all of that Nate just unpacked is, for me, why the AFC Championship game clip is sort of your M. Night Shyamalan twist of this piece of like, well, he was exhausted. He played 80 snaps. It's not like Nick Bolton did this 2 games ago, right? Bam! There it did. He did it 2 games. It's the same thing 2 Chiefs games ago.
Right.
And the other caveat here, I don't have the comments open. I'm just assuming that some folks will get here.
It's Dr. Ozzy's telling me if only Bolton had LRC's eyes, then Nate would love him. And come on, guys, I'm over him. Don't mention his name. It's too hurtful. It's too. I'm not over him. Lewis, where are you?
The part with this also that's kind of it has to be a part of the discussion. Speaking of players that I should get over, and I actually think I am now with Kadarius Toney. In this game, in this AFC Championship game, he had been playing through injuries throughout the year. It's extremely late in an extremely long season. You could say, well, yeah, and maybe in an ideal form, maybe he looks a little faster there. Well, the Chiefs plan on playing late into January every year when the games matter the most, and Steve Spagnuolo knew that throughout the season. So this isn't an outlier either. That's the thing that I think is hard to argue against.
I'll say 2 things to that, and then I know we got to move into the game. First, yes, and I know you know this, but this is just for people that are thinking that way. Everyone was playing late in the year. And so you're playing, your speed is relative to everyone else that's out there just as late in the year and playing banged up. And he did have that arm injury, and that's tough. That's why, he said he wasn't able to catch that. He made a great read on a Lamar throw it was kind of a bad throw, honestly, but it was a good read on it. He had good zone coverage there. That was the play, if I'm recalling, that Trent McDuffie covered 3 guys in one play in zone that I was just like drooling over afterwards. Here's the other thing I will tell you about that play. That play is saved in a folder on my computer labeled Nick Bolton AFC Championship. That play is labeled 4 because there's a play 1, play 2, play 3, and there's also a play 5. And not all of them are identical, but all of them share similar issues. And here's the deal. Everyone gets got. Everyone has bad plays.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, right.
But if you were to ask me to find 5 genuinely subpar snaps
I thought you were going the other way.
From Trent McDuffie, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Now, could I maybe find 5 snaps in a game of Chris Jones getting pancaked? Maybe. But he plays a very different position where on the defensive line, you lose half the time. That wasn't a singular event in that game. And that's just, again, when you're trying to put a guy where he doesn't belong, at least full time, I think you're asking for trouble. And so I think the comparison that some people would make, that isn't fair. And so the sole purpose of this comparison is being asked to do more than he should. He's a better player than this guy. Well, no, I'm just going to stick with the Anthony Hitchens comparison. He's a better football player than Anthony Hitchens was. But he's got similar set of issues and is similarly being asked to do the same things. Because if you throw on Anthony Hitchens' tape with the Cowboys, he looked pretty darn good. And that's because he was being asked to do some very specific stuff. And he was also very sharp. We've been through all that.
Yes.
So that's just the Bolton conversation.
Hey, Nick.
Hopefully,
what if we
hopefully he crushes it.
What if we lined you up in the A or B gap and just said, just hang out. Just hang out.
Yeah, just hang out. Here's the additional problem that Nick's facing. Just on a side note, as he's in a contract year, you could tell Nick Bolton to do that, or you could tell Steve Spagnuolo to do that with Nick Bolton. And then Steve would say, why would I do that when Leo can do it better?
Yep.
Ooh.
Yep. Now, is Leo as good like a Mike Backer? No, he's not.
God, no.
But is he a guy that you can line up as a Sam or in the A gap better? Yes, because he can hold up at the line of scrimmage in a way Bolton can't.
Well, kids, we just need Nick to get healthy. I think it's ultimately what we're getting.
I hope.
Hey, man, he needs conditioning and full health.
Oh, I hope on Tuesday I'm standing in front of you guys looking like Moses after God himself had walked by and saying, I did not believe, and now I've seen, after Nick Bolton just lights up the Bengals. Nobody wants that more than me, except probably like Nick Bolton. But
his agent,
and
his immediate family,
his girlfriend,
his friends.
So there's like a group
every single Mizzou fan.
I'm in the top 20,000. How many Mizzou fans are there?
More than that.
Bad?
More than that.
Okay, that was not okay. Mizzou fans, take it easy. I don't follow college.
Hey Seth,
Stop.
they want to add to their stadium.
Yeah, they're working on that.
So
20 million.
Do you know who Mizzou football's head coach is?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I know.
That's okay.
I know that their receiver looks like a stud.
It's Les Miles.
No, it's not.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
correct. You're right. It's absolutely not. I just thought it'd be even funny. It was the funniest thing. It's Charlie Weiss. Let's go around the 3 box here. We did a lot of Bengals at the top end, so we have done plenty of Bengal conversing. But give me a matchup in your prediction, and I'm gonna let you guys a matchup or a thing to watch, and I'm gonna stall by taking the obvious one that we've already talked about, along with a little extra help from Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show, who tweeted, "The Bengals finished with the second best pressure rate in the league on Sunday, per True Media, but it was a lot of this, and it's a screenshot of Trey Hendrickson looking like a Predator or something, and then a bunch of Bengals getting blocked up by Patriots. There's a lot of this. Hendrickson wins, no one else does, and they can't get home. That plus a couple unblocked Logan Wilson pressures make the numbers look the way they do. So it's hard to do this when the game's actually on the screen in front of you, but when you see Trey Hendrickson across from Kingsley Suamataia, go ahead and look there. It's okay. Maybe you'll miss some Patrick Mahomes footwork, or maybe but that matchup is so enormous for what this game is going to look like. But frankly, I think the Chiefs will win it with a bad day from Kingsley, or at least a not great day. Maybe my Bengals skepticism has burrowed in, no pun intended, further than I expected it to. But I'm gonna go. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go Chiefs 24, Bengals 13. I don't think the offense happens.
Ooh.
There's my sneaky little pick for you.
Here's my additional bonus stat from True Media to Josh's point. The Bengals ranked 28th in defensive productive rating
Against the Patriots.
Yikes. Okay. Yikes.
A lot of Pacheco. This is a little shorter game. Grab a little ground and pound from that Ramondre Stevenson tape. See what happens.
Yes. Even though they had the best pressure rate, this is hard to do, ladies and gentlemen. They had the best pressure rate. They were 28th in defensive production. I mean, that's wild. So now let's add more skill position players. Do you want me to read you the box score? Let's just do it. Does anybody know who plays the skill position for the Patriots? Because my God.
Juju Smith-Schuster. Jacoby Myers.
Ramondre Stevenson, that is their best skill position player.
Big game for him.
Austin Hooper led the team with 2 receptions for 31 yards. J.K. Osborne, 3 receptions, 21 yards.
I know he's a real person. I know that's KJ. There we go. That was a test.
Hunter Henry, he's still in the league. 2 receptions, 18 yards.
Almost a touchdown, I think, that got called back. I remember him.
Yeah. So Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, Rasheed Rice, the majestic white horse on a sandy beach.
He's back.
Paid majestic white horse on a
That's
sandy
right.
beach.
The rich
Right.
Who
gold
Matt Nagy
plated.
said is in the right place as often as
Yeah.
anybody, which is a crazy compliment.
Yep.
Yeah.
So with all that, like, all that really does, and I want to remind people of this too, like, even though the Patriots have a decent offensive line that held up very well outside of Trey Henderson, the Chiefs have a better offensive line. So I expect 2 tight end sets. I expect chip help. This may put a little bit more of the burden actually on Jawan Taylor. But I will say Chiefs 30, Bengals 20.
30. All right. I would just note that the Bengals defense has given the Chiefs problems in the past. I think, did Wilson practice today?
No.
Okay. Wilson's one of their better players.
Logan Wilson, yes, their
Yep.
linebacker. Yeah, their version of Nick Bolton.
Yep. And he's been important to what they do. DJ Reader being gone is really interesting to me. Trey Hendrickson has given them fits in the past, and that's been part of their issues with producing against the Bengals. So I see them providing Kingsley a little more help because it's just a different type of pass rush. With the Ravens, it's more of there's a couple guys that are low level dudes and like 3 or 4 guys that are high level guys, kind of like they really, it's a team effort. With the Bengals, there's other guys that can hurt you, but not as much as Hendrickson. I think I just have a weird feeling that this is kind of the year that the Bengals' ability to kind of stymie the Chiefs has kind of come to a halt a little bit. And so I'm going to go. I was correct last week in a sense that the offense was back. Now, it was also back to shooting itself in the foot at stupid moments, which was frustrating.
It's called Only Weird Games, Seth.
No, I'm going with somewhat D-Mac Wakefield comments. Their version of Nick Bolton. So Perine for 50 receiving yards on 2 catches. I think Kansas City 34. Oh man, someone just took it in the comments. I think it's 34-17. And I think the conversation about the Chiefs and the Bengals is going to be a whole lot of fun this week.
I'm just going to add in my wholehearted belief the Chiefs cannot win this game by more than like 11 points because if they get up by double digits, Andy Reid will stop trying. It's week 2. That is a huge part of me saying 24-13 is like...
Give him the ball.
It might be 21-10 at halftime, and I would think it would end 24-13. So there you have it. You can we'll have 5 things for you as well on the KCSN feed, along with everything else you can get across the KCSN podcast feed, and as you may be watching now on the KCSN YouTube to get ready for the game. We will of course be back on Tuesday. Nate, week 2's here. Chiefs-Bengals round whatever is here. Get us out of here, and hopefully we'll have a fun show and not just a weird one on Tuesday.
Come on. It's going to be weird. That's okay. That's okay. Just accept it. Embrace the weird, ladies and gentlemen. Now, look, okay. Ask me what I think of jazz, Josh.
What do you think of Seth's wife, Jazz, Nate? Or the music genre? Which one was it?
Well, you know,
Don't go for any bingo. Don't go for any bingo.
I actually like Miss Brisco. You
Okay,
know,
great.
she's a big Nate Taylor fan.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
Jazz is too.
I've spent many concerts and weddings with her. She's a great gal.
Many. Many.
You know,
Something I don't know about.
Hey, man, ain't nobody asked you about her, cuz. Hey, the fuck are you doing? Bro, on behalf of you know who, hey, they didn't ask you about me. Why you saying my name, cuz? I actually love Miss Brisco. She's great. I asked you about Miss Jazz, you idiot.
I asked you back.